Hi everyone, I'm Prentis Rollins and welcome to lesson number 10 in my 10-part course on creating comics. I'm sorry to say this is our final lesson. And in this lesson we're going to be looking at one of the most crucial stages in the creation of a comics page, inking. What you're doing when you're inking is you're taking the first draft of the page, the rough version, and turning it into a polished piece of art, ready to be published. It may be published in print, it may be published online, or it may just be for yourself. It may be colored, it may be in black and white. But whatever the case may be, this is your final line art, so you want it to look good. This is a penciled page from a graphic novel I'm working on right now. Looks pretty good, but it's nowhere near finished. Here's the page after I inked it. I've added shadows and rendering, lots of little details, and in general it just looks clearer. Here's the two versions side by side. It's pretty easy to ink your own pencils because you definitely know what you want your pages to look like. But if you're inking someone else's pencils, you sometimes have to sort of interpret their art and figure out the best ways to make it look its best. We've got a lot to do in this lesson. We're going to look at inking the Superman page we've been working on in the lessons on penciling. So let's jump right in. So guys, you may remember this is the completed pencil page that we did over the last two classes. It's got Superman, he's the only character along with this rock monster. Now the first thing I'm going to do when I'm inking this is I'm going to rule my dialogue balloons and panel borders. By the way, ordinarily the lettering, the text, would be done laid in by hand first, and the person doing that would be using this. It's called an Ames lettering guide. This is a thing that you use with a T-square in order to rule very straight, equally spaced lines for doing lettering by hand. I don't have enough time to really talk about lettering in this course, and the fact of the matter is in professional comics it's mostly done by fonts on computers these days. Hand-done lettering is kind of a dying art form. But we're just going to ignore that, and I'm just going to show you the way that you would normally lay in dialogue balloons and panel borders. This is a template. You may remember I introduced this in lesson 1. It's a plastic template for drawing perfect little dialogue balloons and ovals. Two. Going to be one pretty big dialogue balloon down here at the bottom of the page where Superman is saying "for justice." Okay. This, you may remember, is a French curve. It is a tool that you can use to make nice curving lines. Right now I'm doing what are called the tails of the dialogue balloons. The tails point directly towards the person who is saying the words. Turn my page upside down. Now I'm going to take this clear ruler, and I'm going to begin laying in the panel borders. And you can see I'm just using a felt tip art pen for this. Okay. There we go. Our panel borders are now inked in. And as you can see, I allowed this dialogue balloon to poke outside the panel, and this one. That's why I did the balloons first. And I also was careful. Whoop, actually, I made a mistake already. I put ink, ink straight across there. I shouldn't have put the panel border there, but that's okay, because we're going to correct all these mistakes at the end with white ink, which is an inker's best friend. All right, so right now I'm going to start inking with this. This is a 102 point crow quill pen nib, and this is just India ink. And these are traditional inker's tools. Let me zoom in a little bit. I'm going to start on this face. Sometimes when these nibs are new, it takes them a while to sort of break in, as it were. But you can see by varying the pressure that you're applying with your hand to the pen, you can vary your line weight. And that's really the main benefit of working with with a Crowquill pen or a brush, you get a line that is, as inkers say, alive. If you're just using a felt tip pen all the time, you're going to get what's called a dead line, a line that is less interesting, less vibrant, less dynamic. But for beginners, it's perfectly okay to use felt tip markers while they're learning, and because mastering one of these takes a little bit of time and practice, and it's okay to create comics while you're learning and just having fun with the tools that you're comfortable with. See how I'm constantly turning my page? Always done that. I'm always trying to be careful, especially to not let my hand touch an area that might have wet ink on it still. You've got to be really kind of careful about that. Okay, about 90 minutes have passed, and as you can see, I have finished doing the basic line work for panels 1 through 3. I haven't put in any of the black areas yet. That'll be at the end. For this Superman figure in panel 4, I want to use a brush, and I want mainly so I can demonstrate that brushes can be used for inking comics. So after this is a number 2 sable brush. I've just dipped it in India ink, and now I'm just twirling it a little bit to get a nice point. And it's actually, normally I don't ink with brush very much, but a lot of inkers do. I want to do it here because I want this figure to have a really bold outline. Like he's, because the heavier you make the line, the more close to camera the figure seems to be. So by giving him a very heavy outline, I'm making him sort of pop, jump out of the page at us, the viewers. And when you're using brush, it's even easier to modulate your line weight. And by pressing down very lightly, just barely touching the tip of your brush to the paper, you can get these very, very thin lines. Take some practice though. And when you're using brush, you can kind of fill in black areas right away more easily, as I'm doing now. Putting a strong shadow under Superman's arm here. So I've finished quite a bit more. As you can see, I finished the Superman figure, and I'm now working on this background monster is getting blown to bits. These little lines that you see me putting in with the pen are, this technique is called feathering. And you can see a lot of it here and here. It's a good way of simultaneously indicating the light source and accentuating the form or shape of an object. See how these lines kind of wrap around Superman's arms and his torso. Very, very commonly used technique in comics. Now I'm just putting lots of little tick marks in here to help indicate that this is a rock-like substance. Again, the X marks mean add black ink. When I was learning to ink comics properly, I studied the inking of several famous and important American comics artists. Klaus Janson would be one. It's really important when you're, developing as a comics artist to try to zero in on one or two or three artists whose style you really admire, so that you can emulate them. You don't want to become a clone. You don't want to emulate them too much. But by studying the work of other artists, your own style will take shape, and it can take a long time. You don't want to hurry it. Now I'm going to start. I just wanted you guys to see me putting in this burst. So I'm going to start doing that. The way I'm doing it is just with a felt tip pen and this ruler. I'm just making these long strokes with the pen using the ruler. Very easy. now I'm also going to add in speed lines a little bit later. And I'm going to use my brush again to start putting in these Kirby dots. So guys, now I have finished all of the line art and I erased the extraneous pencil marks. So we're pretty close to completion and I think this page is looking pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start filling in the blacks, but before I do that, I think I promised to show you an interesting inking technique I learned involving the use of spatter. This is a toothbrush. I'm just dipping it in the ink, and now I can, using my thumb, just to give this this guy's rocky body a little interest, a little visual interest, I can kind of spread little areas of ink spatter. It's a quick way to get a nice effect. This is what you call the low-tech solution. I always go for the low-tech solution. Okay, that's good. And now I'm just going to start in the comics business. This is called spotting blacks. You're basically just going over all the areas that you've X'd out with black ink using a brush. I don't know if you can see it. There's a smudge right here. That happened when I was erasing. I didn't realize that a little bit of the ink was not quite dry. That happens now and then. It's no big deal. If that ever happens, you just correct it with white ink. That's going to be our next step. So the page is almost done. We're at the point where I'm applying white ink. There it is. And I'm using this is called a globe tip dip pen. And I'm making corrections. The first one I'm going to do is this mistake I made early on of drawing the panel borders over where his hand would be. As long as you've got white ink, there's really never, or almost never, any reason to start over again if you make an inking mistake. I've sneezed on pages, I've spilled coffee on them. On one occasion, my 2-year-old daughter took a black marker and drew all over a page, but I'm always able to salvage them with white ink. It doesn't matter. Some of my pages have had so much white ink, they They just have layers of black and white ink. But it doesn't matter, because the only thing that matters when you're a professional comics artist is what it looks like when it's reproduced, when it's photocopied, for example. None of these mistakes will ever show up in the printed version. As you can see here, I'm kind of accentuating these speed lines. Whoop! You see a blob of white ink just dropped off my pen, and now I can clean it off the page with a paper towel. It's okay. Cleaning off some of these black spatter marks from the dialogue balloon. Now I'm putting some, where the Kirby dots are, I'm putting, just to be fancy, I'm putting some white Kirby dots over the black ones. I'm going to repair this ugly smudge up here just by jazzing this area up with white Kirby dots. Also cleaning up the gutters. The gutters, again, are these areas between panels. Neatness counts. Now I'm switching back to my crow quill, dipping it in white ink. And I'm just quickly adding some definition to Superman's hair. Now I might continue these cracks a little bit with white ink on the creature's surface. Add a little detail to the creature's face. Okay, guys, I think this page is done. So the entire process of inking that page took me about 5 hours, but that's after many years of practice. When you're a comic book artist, you are motivated to get faster, partly to keep up with deadlines, and partly because you usually get paid by the page and not by the hour. Just to recap, here's the thumbnail we did of the page we were working on. This just took a few minutes, but it was a very important part of the process because it was here that we made our major decisions about how the page was designed, how many panels there were, how the characters were posed, and where the dialogue balloons went. Here's the final pencils of the page. Looking pretty good, but definitely not done. And here's the final inks. Looking rock solid. Here's the pencils and inks side by side. The only things missing are the words and color. As I said earlier in the lesson, the text in comics these days is usually done with software and fonts. But that's a fairly recent development. 20 years ago, most comics lettering was still being done by hand. Lettering by hand was both a profession and an art form in its own right. Coloring in the world of professional comics is also done mostly with computer. Here's the inked final version of another page from the graphic novel I'm working on. And here you can see the colored version. I did the color with my tablet and computer. As you can see, you can get some very beautiful results this way, results that it was just not possible to get before computer coloring became possible. But coloring is a subject in its own right, and unfortunately, I just don't have time to tackle it here. What I've tried to do in this course is to introduce you to what I think are some of the basic skills a comics creator has to have, from a knowledge of storytelling to the basics of plain drawing, including perspective and rendering people and things in light and shadow, to the fundamentals of drawing faces and bodies correctly, to the actual processes involved in turning your story into a finished comics page. From thumbnail to pencils to final inks. And I hope that in the last 3 lessons, the ones devoted to penciling and inking a page, it all came together. We were able to utilize everything that we've covered and learned. There was a lot that we didn't have time to cover. Designing characters, the basics of lettering and coloring, just to name a few. But those are subjects for another time. What I hope I've done here is to convey some really important facts about the absolute basics. And whether or not you see yourself pursuing a career in comics, the skills we've talked about here will serve you well whatever you end up doing, if you're a creative person who loves to draw. There will always be a huge demand for creative people who can draw well and who understand sequential storytelling. In storyboard art for film and TV, in game design and concept art, and in all manner of graphic design and illustration. The most important thing I can convey is have fun with your comics drawing, especially if you're still a kid. Don't get too obsessed with making things perfect and polished. The skills will develop with time and lots of practice. We're out of time for now. It's been such a pleasure for me to lead you through this little adventure. Thanks for being with me if you've made it this far, and thanks to Outclass Education for giving me the opportunity. Have fun, keep on practicing, and the best of luck to you in your future comics creation. Bye-bye for now.